Hi, I'm Glyn Dewis and welcome to episode 11 of my video podcast. Okay, so to kick things off this week, I want to answer a question that I got through on an email from somebody who watches this show, and it was all to do with how I create that cartoonish kind of look to my pictures. Now, the question wasn't to say, how do you create that cartoon painterly look, because obviously we've covered that in earlier show. The actual question was how to do with how do you make the heads bigger. Now, I've got to be honest with you, I'm almost embarrassed to say how I do that because it is just crazy simple. But I suppose like most things in Photoshop, sometimes it's the simplest things that can be most effective. I think we can almost tend to try and think that things have to be harder than they really are. So I'll kind of show you how I do that. But before we do it, I'll just show you a couple of little things on this picture here. So this is obviously the final finished result, but to give you an idea of the actual retouching steps in this picture, which was predominantly done in Photoshop as opposed to how I'm generally doing things now, where I will cater for a lot of the retouching in Lightroom. But if I just take you through all the retouching so far with this picture here, I'll turn everything off apart from the original out of camera shot. So this is the photo against grey. The reason it was against grey, to be honest with you, I didn't really know if I was going to be using that fast compositing technique where you can use blend modes like soft light or overlay to add a background in. So I shot it on grey, so it kind of gave me the flexibility of either using that way, or it allowed enough contrast between Quasha, our model here, and the background to make it kind of easy enough to cut out. So it kind of gave me the best of both worlds. So just working through then, the first part is a little bit of retouch, and you'll probably see as I zoom in there, that's mainly to do with removing blemishes, but also working on the eyes, and you can see the eyes being enhanced. Now I tend to do that more in Lightroom now using the adjustment brush. Again, you'll be able to check that out on earlier versions of this particular show. But then there's the dodging and burning, and you can see that when it comes to creating that cartoon look, the dodging and burning really does play a huge part in that, because you tend to go a little bit more than what you normally would do if it was just say like a normal kind of portrait. So you need to kind of push the dodging and burning. Now I think I've covered the dodging and burning before, but I'll just have a quick kind of run through over that again, because you'll see then the little folder here where I've kept everything nice and tidy. The dodging and burning is done on grey layers, 50% grey layers, and I'll show you why that is and why it gives you so much more flexibility. So let me just click on this one here and I'll add a blank layer. Then I'm going to go to edit and fill, and from the fill menu choose 50% grey, and then I'm going to choose a blend mode of soft light. Now it used to be that I would have two separate layers. I'd do one for the skin and then one for everything else, but now generally I'm tending to do it all on one layer. So I'll call this layer dodge and burn. The blend mode is soft light, and then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use my dodge and burn tool in the toolbar. So we'll come down here and I'm just going to choose dodge tool, and one thing I'm also going to do is click on the foreground colour here, and I'm going to change that so it becomes 50% grey. So I'm going to put 50 in where it says HSB. So in the B for brightness, changing that to 50. And you'll see that in the top here now, that gives me this 50% grey colour. And I'll click OK. So then, looking at the top here, when we're using the dodge tool or the burn tool, we get options available to us. And while I'm in here, I generally keep them the same. So you'll see that it says range. We've got a drop down menu here. I'll keep that to mid-tones. Exposure would generally be around about the 10% mark, but I'm just going to use it at 20 just so it becomes really visible what I'm doing on the screen while you're watching this little demo. And I'll also leave a little tick in the protect tones dialog box just there. So the basic idea behind the dodging and burning is that you're going to brighten any highlights and darken any mid-tones or shadow areas with the burn tool. But let's just say that I was going to work around this picture here. I'll just put a couple of strokes down his nose just there, and every time I lift off, that's going to actually add 20% more of the actual dodging. So a little bit in there, a little bit on his forehead, and then I'm just going to highlight down the side of it, increase these highlights going down the side. And I shall also add a highlight onto his lip just there. And I'll also do a little bit of burning down. So like I've said in a previous video, when I'm using one of these tools like the dodge tool, if I hold down my alt key, it automatically jumps over to the other tool, and you'll not see any difference up in the top here. So just bear in mind that if you do press your alt key, you are then going to be using the other tool, and that's a pretty handy kind of keyboard shortcut there, as opposed to having to keep coming over to the toolbar on the left hand side and then flipping between each tool. You can just stay in one of them, use the alt key or the option key, and it'll swap you over. So let's just burn down the eyebrows, and I'll just do a little bit of burning around the side of his nose here, just lifting off each time to add that 20% in, and you're just going to add in a few strokes. So something like that. I might burn down a little bit more on the side of his nose, and I always when we're doing this kind of cartoon look, almost give him, like, I guess you could call it eyeliner, sort of enhance the eyes here by darkening down the eyelashes, and we'll just darken around the outsides of the eyes as well. Now obviously I'd spend quite a bit more time doing this, but just to give you an idea of what that's doing, just turn that on and off, you can start to see the dodging and burning really start to take effect. So just a quick review on that. Why do we do it on a grey layer? Well, it gives you advantages here, a much more flexible way to work. If I just turn everything off except for that grey layer now, so we can see what we've got here. You remember at the start we set the foreground colour here to 50% grey? Well, what that means is if I get a brush now, I can actually remove parts of it by painting in that brush at 50% grey, because obviously it's going to take me back to the original colour of that background layer. I don't have to paint all the time at 100% to remove it. I could paint at different opacities. So like, let's say this highlight going down the nose here, I don't want it quite so strong, so maybe half as strong as what it is. So I'll just put the opacity of the brush to 50% and put a stroke down there, and it does that. So that's really handy. And the other thing was to do with, let's say on the eye here, where those are really prominent burn marks that we've done there. If those didn't blend in so well, what we can do is get like the freehand lasso tool, make a quick selection of that area there, and then just go to the filter menu, choose blur and Gaussian blur, and then Photoshop can just control how much you blur those areas anywhere within these marching ants. And by bringing up the blur, not too far obviously, but just bringing it up there, what you're going to do is help those dodging and burning that you've done to blend in naturally to each other, so it doesn't look too obvious what you've done. Although saying that, we are working on a cartoon picture, so it's going to look pretty obvious anyway. Alright, so that was the dodging and burn. Let's get rid of that layer there. We then added the details, and this I used a plugin called Topaz Details, which I absolutely love. Really good and inexpensive plugin, which I highly recommend you get. And then there was the cutout, the background. If I just zoom out by double clicking on the hand tool, you can see this is the kind of thing we've got here. Now, it's your choice when you do this, making the head bigger, when you do it, but my advice would be to do it at the very end, because you're going to spend quite a bit of time cutting out your subject to actually get them with this background behind them. Now if you do that once you've had his head bigger, and then at a later stage you change your mind, you're a little bit snookered. You're going to have to go back and do all that selection all over again. So I tend to do it at the very last part of the retouching. So with this picture here, that's the cutout done. We've added in the birds as well. You can see down here I do tend to add birds into a picture quite a lot. And then there's the final look, and that in the final look here is when I've enlarged the size of his head. So this is where you're going to have to do something non-destructive, and all I'm going to do is create a merged or combined layer at the top of my layer stack. Now ignore these two text layers and final look layers. Imagine those weren't there. Let's just say that the birds layer is the very top layer at the moment. So to do this merged layer, you've got a big keyboard shortcut, Control Alt Shift E or Command Option Shift E, or a quick way of doing it is go to the select menu, choose all, then edit, copy merged, and then edit and paste. And that will basically put a combined layer of all the layers below it on the top of the layer stack. And you'll see that if I turn everything off now underneath it, the picture stays the same because it's all been merged into this one layer. So then here's the embarrassing part. This is how easy it is. I'm going to get my freehand lasso tool. I'm just going to make a very rough selection going around the outside of his head, around onto his neck, and then back up again. So I'm not obviously trying to get really accurate selection here. It's a very rough selection. Then I'm just going to press Command or Control J to put that up on its own layer. So now we've only got the head there. Now I don't actually need the combined layer now. I can get rid of that. The only thing I needed was the head. So the first thing I'll do then is go to Edit and Free Transform to get the actual transform handles here. And if I hold down my Shift and my Alt key, or Shift and Option key, and I'll just sort of use one of these handles in the upper left here, when I drag upwards, it makes it grow in proportion from the center. Now, one little extra thing there, you'll notice when you have these transform handles here, can you see how there's like a little, almost like a crosshair right in the middle? That basically dictates from where your picture grows. So at the moment when I do it, as I click on the outside handle, it grows in proportion from the center. Now, if I drag that over to, say, I don't know, just up in the top right over there, and then try to expand it, you see how it grows going down to the left-hand side? So it's growing from that point onwards. But I obviously want it to be dead center. So we'll just do that, and it snaps right into the middle. So I can expand it like that, and let's just zoom out just a little bit. Obviously, I don't want to go too big. Otherwise, it's kind of ridiculous. So that's like normal. We're going to go to around about there, something like that. Now, once I've done it, I get my move tool by pressing V on my keyboard or just choosing the tool in the very, very top of my toolbar here. And I generally use my up and down arrow keys, left and right arrow keys, to position the head where I want it. And I want to kind of position it so that I have as least work to do to blend this in as possible. Now I'm going to go for something like that. And I can see where this kind of like this funky camera strap lines up. That might be a good place to do it, around about there. Once I've done that, I'm just going to add a layer mask, a white layer mask. I'm going to get a brush, making sure that my foreground colour is black, because we know when we use masks, white reveals, black conceals. Now I want to conceal the expanded bit around his neck so I can blend it in with the normal sized person below. Now when I first do this, we don't want the brush to be really soft. I'll generally go for around about 50-ish% on the hardness. And then I'm going to come in nice and close and just start painting it away. Actually make sure that 100% opacity there, and start painting it away. Now when I go right to his face here, I'll make the brush nice and small. So we'll go down here. You can see I can bring in the original collar, and you can kind of hide things under chins here. So like, let's say his collar there, that's going to come underneath just that part. And we'll do the other side as well, blend that in so we can see that the strap and the collar kind of goes under his chin, or makes it look as if it goes under his chin. Oops, something like that. If I go too far, I can change the colour from black to white to bring in the other areas. And let's just paint this in just here. Something like that. Now this area at the bottom here, where we can see that we've got this really, this is where the shadow is, where obviously when we photographed this guy, the light at the front of him was quite high up, so we've got a very obvious shadow underneath his chin. So I need to blend that in nice and softly. And this is where I would choose a completely soft brush. I'll take the hardness down to 0%. I'll make it just a little bit bigger, and then I'll just start trying to blend it in like this here. Something like that. And you can take your time, kind of really spending a long time. In fact, I need to just do a little bit of work on this. Let's just change the colour to white. We can blend that in there and then flip it around, something like that. But that is all there is to it. It's just knowing how to use a layer mask, and it's just trickery. We can tell that the head's big. You could always play a trick on them as well. Tell them that you didn't expand the head. It's just, well, that's obviously the camera. That's what it's done. But yeah, your head is that big. But that's basically all it is to make the head bigger. So you're going to create a combined layer, make a selection of the head, and then just use the free transform to expand it, and then a layer mask to bring it in. And then once you've done that, who can resist just turning it on and off just a few times just to make his head bigger, smaller, like that. And then obviously in the final picture, a little bit of text was added as well. So that's it, just a really quick way that you can expand someone's head if ever you find yourself wanting to do that. Let's now just jump over to a quick commercial break just to show you about a brand new tutorial that I've just released called Supercar Retouching. Hi guys, I'm Glyn Dewis and I'm a photographer, retoucher and trainer from the UK, and I just want to take a few moments of your time to let you know about a brand new full-length downloadable tutorial I've just released called Supercar Retouching. Now in this tutorial, which is roughly an hour and a half to 2 hours long, I take you through the whole retouching steps from the out of camera picture all the way through to the finished retouch. Now we're going to go through everything. We're going to have a look behind the scenes so you can have a look at exactly where we were photographing, what equipment was used, what settings were used, and then taking that finished image over into Lightroom or Camera Raw to then start preparing it. we're going to look at bringing out details, how to shape the light, how to do some sharpening, and much more before then we go up a gear and head over into Photoshop, because that's when we then realistically add in a new sky. I'll show you how to add realistic reflections on the side of the car and in the windows. Also how to deal with problem areas where we ended up with like a hot spot in the back of the car caused by the really bright sunlight on the day. We then move on to doing colour effects, and also I show you how to use plugins but non-destructively. And then we finish off with that cartoon kind of painterly look. Now included in this tutorial are the raw files, so you're also going to be able to carry on and do these steps yourself. You also get a full layered Photoshop file amongst other things within this download. There's a couple of bonus videos in there as well. You'll also be able to take all these retouching steps and use them on your own images, just like I have in this picture here of an Aston Martin V12. So guys, that's supercar retouching, available now on my website, glindewis.com. Okay, so to finish off, I just want to show you a really quick technique, and it's one that I used in this picture here of natural bodybuilder Nigel St. Louis. Now the technique I'm talking about is where you can see on this back wall here that he's been composited in front of. They've got this kind of flag here and it looks very decayed and weathered away, like it's been there for a long time. So I want to show you very quickly how you can do that kind of effect for any pictures that you might want to do this on, or maybe even make graffiti look as if it's been there a lot longer than it has. Okay, so if we just go over to this image here. Now this is the original background that I used. It's actually a stock image. It's not one that I photographed myself. I got this one a while back now from iStockPhoto.com. And this is the one that I used to put Nigel in front of. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you then first of all by going File, Place. And I've got an image on my hard drive here of a Union Jack, so we'll click Place. Now the reason I'm using Place is so that it puts it directly into the document I'm working on, like this brick wall here. If I just use File and Open, it would have opened it up as a separate document, and that would mean me having to then drag it across. So using Place kind of speeds up your workflow because it puts it within your open document. But another great thing about it is that it also brings it in as a smart object. And you'll know from previous videos, I'm really super keen on working as non-destructively as I can. And by using smart objects, that's what it allows us to do. Now you'll notice that I stretched it out as well because the dimensions of this flag are considerably smaller than the wall itself. Ordinarily that could have been a problem, but with something like this it doesn't matter at all because the flag itself is going to be made to look really misshapen and sort of weathered and old, so stretching it out, not an issue. Okay, so what we're going to do then, I'm going to show you how we can first of all blend this into the wall, and we're going to do that funnily enough by using a blend mode. And I'm going to choose one from the drop down menu on the layers panel here. I tend to think that overlay works quite nicely for this one because it really does add some contrast in it. I'm not concerned about the saturation boost at the moment because we can control that. The main thing is how the flag interacts with all these cracks and crevices on the wall below. So it kind of makes it look a lot more realistic, especially this little bit here. That looks great. It kind of looks as if it has already been painted on there. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do then is I'm going to use a brush to make it look as if it's a little bit decayed. So before I do that, I'm just going to go down to the layer mask and click on a layer mask, a white layer mask, and then I'm going to choose a brush. Now I'm going to come over by pressing B on my keyboard or by coming over to the toolbar on the left hand side, a box standard brush, and at the top left then we get these options that come up and we can choose the kind of brush we want. And what I'm looking for is a brush that's going to be able to give me the impression of a very uneven surface, something that looks decayed. And these spatter brushes, which come by default within Photoshop, work perfectly. Obviously you can get different brushes online, lots of free resources for that, but these ones for this one work absolutely brilliant. Now I'm going to use one of these ones here. It's a spatter brush, number 27 will be fine, so I'll click on that and then I'll click on the top bar to make that the brushes there to close down. Now I can use my right or left bracket keys to increase or decrease the size of it. And what I would ordinarily do is just kind of come in and you can start painting it away. And you can see that you get that kind of weathered, sort of where the harsh line isn't there anymore. Now you can make it look as if it's sort of weathering away. But to help to make it add even more realism to that, what we can do is go into our brush options here. Now we've got lots of options, and you can probably see these before. We've got shape dynamics, scattering, texture, transfer, and so on and so forth. So all I would advise really when you're into the brush options here, just have a play around and see what you can come up with. So I'm going to click on shape dynamics first of all, and we can see we've got size jitter. And if you look at the bottom down here, this gives you an idea of what it is you're going to be doing to that brush. I'm using a Wacom tablet, so I always have this set to pen pressure. So the harder I press or the lighter, it kind of affects how much of this is actually going to be applied. So we're going to go for size jitter. Obviously, the harder I press when I've got this tablet, because it's pressure sensitive, the more that it'll increase the size of it. So we'll go for size jitter around there, angle jitter. No kind of formula to this. I'm just kind of playing around, just seeing what happens in this preview. Scattering, we can do that as well with pen pressure, so I'll probably do it like that. Count jitter, and transfer is a good one, because now we can use opacity, because this depends, however hard or light I press down with my tablet, depends how strong that brush is applying the effect. So I'm going to go for around about 70, 75, something like that. And that's all I'll do for now. And you can see, if you look in the preview, we've got certain parts of this brush here that are very, very obvious, where it really sort of obvious white, and we can see on the outsides where it's going grey, and that's because of the opacity jitter. It's given us an idea of what kind of effect we're going to get. And then all I'll do is I'll just come in and I'll start painting it randomly away off the flag. So the harder I press down, the more that effect is applied. The lighter I sort of use it. Let's just close it out of the way so we can see more of what I'm doing. And I can just keep going around here now just to taste. And because this is being used as a smart object, I can actually go in there and alter it later on. So let's say we go for something like that. It's looking good. So it obviously doesn't look like it's perfect, like it's just been applied on there. We can really come in and start bringing areas away so it doesn't look quite so obvious. And then what I do to maybe get rid of the saturation is, and I think we talked about this in a previous episode, and that's about using clipping masks. So I'm going to go for something like a hue and saturation adjustment. And just so it affects only the flag, i.e. the layer directly below it, I'm going to use a clipping mask. And that's this icon that you can see in the dialog box just here. And when I click on that, you'll see you get a little right-angled arrow saying that this is only affecting directly below. Now, if you can't find the icon there, just put your cursor in between your adjustment layer and the layer you want to affect, and hold down your Alt or Option key, and you'll get this little icon pops up. When that appears, just click, and you get exactly the same thing there. So that's a clipping mask. So now I can just reduce the saturation, and you'll see in the flag there that that saturation is starting to go. And that is basically all it was. Just a little extra thing at the end there, just to show you one of the ways that I did to create this effect on the background here. And obviously once the composite's been done, we've added in some lighting effects to darken the whole thing down. Okay, so thanks for tuning into that episode. Obviously, if you've got any questions or comments, by all means, just drop me a line to Glyn at glyndewis.com. And if there's any tips or techniques that you want to see in future episodes, just let me know and I'll see if I can fit them in. As always, if you haven't already, make sure you click on the subscribe button, which is, where are we now? It's going to be around about here, I think, when we finish it. So click on the subscribe button so you don't miss any more episodes, and also just let to know about anything else that I post out as well. Right, that's all for today. Had the hair done. Big difference, as you can see. I'll see you next week.